Hello and welcome. This is video number 8 in a 13-part series about World War II. And in today's video, we're going to talk about the path to genocide. That's the title of this video. So it'll be taking a look at some of the early steps taken by Hitler and the Nazis once they were in power in Germany to take away the rights of Jews and simply make life difficult for anybody that they deemed inferior. So with that, let's get started. Definitely want you to see that this was a process that unfolded over a period of time. It wasn't as if the Nazis took power and immediately took people like Jews and put them into death camps and started murdering thousands and thousands of them each day. It was something that built slowly but surely over, I guess you could say, a period of about 10 or 11 years to get to its final stage. So with that, we'll go ahead and talk through this topic. So what we'll start with would be early policies. And so this will go back to before World War II itself actually began. And so the starting point is and this really goes back in a lot of ways to the 20s with Hitler writing his book Mein Kampf and the Nazis beginning to come together and putting together their ideology, which would develop and evolve over the years. But speaking specifically to what would become the Holocaust, one of the things that Hitler and the Nazis had talked about for a long time was establishing a new racial order for Europe and for Germany in particular. And one of the terms that gets used when we're talking about that is the term Aryan, which the way Hitler used it was a reference to a perfect German race or a perfect German person, speaking to the idea of these perfect, strong, fit, blonde-haired, blue-eyed people. Now, the Aryans that he was talking about was not real. The term was a reference to a different group of people from a different time and a different place. Nevertheless, that was the term that Hitler and the Nazis used, and what they were talking about was a perfect German people. And what that meant was anybody that was outside of what they deemed to be perfect, Jews as one group specifically noted, but basically anybody else that didn't fit this criteria that they were putting together and was thus viewed inferior, had no place in this new and developing Germany. So one thing that meant is as early as the 1930s, once the Nazis came to power, there was reason to be concerned if you were somebody that was outside of what they described as perfect. Now, at that time, no one could really have any idea what it might mean for somebody to be outside of that. But they definitely were setting the stage for some people being considered good and right for Germany, and some people considered not to be good and right for Germany. Where things begin to really take shape in an official way, get started in 1935 with the passage of the Nuremberg Laws. The Nuremberg Laws specifically targeted Jews living in Germany and began to change what was legal and what was allowed for Jews living in Germany. Now, just backing up just a touch, one thing to note, we've talked about bad treatment of Jews a few different times in a few different places around the world. So one thing that was somewhat normal at this point in time, at least as far as perception was concerned, whether you were talking about people living in Germany or people living in other parts of the world, is that generally speaking, there was dislike for Jews. And part of that came down simply to the fact that generally speaking, wherever you were talking about in the world, Jews were a small number of people within the population that they were living in. And that fact alone is the kind of thing that just the way people operate was very likely enough for them to be looked down upon or thought poorly of. Generally speaking, the way people work, if you're in the minority of a group of people, and in this example, we're talking about Jews, it could be anything that puts you in the minority of a group of people, puts you at risk of persecution. So one thing to note, when the Nazis spoke negatively about Jews, that wasn't necessarily the kind of thing that was going to get very many people going, "Oh my goodness, how could they say that? That's so unfair. That's so mean." Because in many cases, if anything, people had a negative view of Jews. Now, that didn't mean people thought that they should not be allowed to live in Germany, or that they should necessarily be denied things or whatever. Uh, but often the feeling was somewhat negative. Now, within Germany itself, one thing that maybe makes some of this process seem a little different than it might have been in other places is Jews had become a fully assimilated part of German society by the 1930s. In fact, Jews probably were about as well accepted within Germany, generally speaking, compared to other parts of the world, uh, as any place. And so, in a lot of ways, this was maybe one of the more surprising places of others that you maybe could have picked of places in the world where things would go very, very badly for Jews. At any rate, starting in 1935, the Nuremberg laws were passed, which, in an official way, began to take away rights of Jews living in Germany. Now, I put just a couple of examples up on the screen. First of all, German citizenship was taken away. So that would be very much the same as someone who's an American citizen living in America right now, just with the stroke of a pen, no longer being considered an American citizen. Um, Marriage restrictions was another thing. Marriages between Jews and non-Jews became something that was no longer allowed, and just a variety of other things started to change for Jews living in Germany in 1935, and then moving forward over the next couple of years. Now, this was certainly concerning and frustrating to Jews living in Germany, but given the way Jews had been treated for so long in so many different parts of the world, it wasn't necessarily surprising. And I think the general view early in this process was, as crummy as this is a temporary thing. This will pass. Keep in mind, part of why that was happening was just the makeup of the German government at that time, which governments change on a pretty regular basis. So maybe this is the deal right now, but move forward a few years, these laws are going to go away at some point. I think that was kind of the general feeling. So dislike of these laws, certainly by Jews, but an expectation that it would be temporary. Now, one of the big shifts began, at least as far as the perception that this was a temporary thing, and put up with it and get by, and things will get better eventually. A big shift happened in November of 1938. There was an incident referred to as Priesthole, or Night of Broken Glass, is what that translates out to, where Nazis in Germany used an incident that took place actually outside of Germany to be a rationale for attacking Jewish homes and businesses and synagogues. And so over the course of what amounted to 2 days, the 9th and 10th of November, basically much of the Jewish community was attacked, I guess you could say. And this was a scary point. This definitely marked an amping up of poor treatment towards Jews. And it's at this point that you begin to see Jews who were able to begin to attempt to leave Germany for someplace else. And so the next shift would be emigration. Notice emigration is with an E. So there's emigration and there's immigration. Emigration with an E is when you exit from one place to go somewhere else. And so with emigration, we're talking about people trying to leave Germany in this case. Now, something that's important to note is with the way the rules and laws were set up, it wasn't simply so easy as just going from one place to another. There were hoops, if you were a German Jew, that you would have to jump through. Your assets were seized and controlled by the German government. So even if you were a very well-to-do person, getting access to your resources to be able to leave was a challenge. And one thing that eventually wouldn't be allowed would be for you to take with you, in essence, your money when you did leave. So for those that had the means to make the purchases necessary to be able to leave, one of the things that they were going to have to do was leave everything that they had behind. And so there was a lot to think about when deciding whether or not to try to leave Germany, even if you had the opportunity. Now, in the early phases of this, so basically think the end of 38, 1939, 1940, Hitler favored emigration out of Germany for Jews. And you would have maybe thought that he would have made it a little easier and allowed the policies to work a little more favorably to people who were willing to leave. Nevertheless, his open position was, yeah, it's great. If they all just simply leave Germany, that's great. And many started to do that. One of the problems became, though, that if you're going to leave from Germany to somewhere else, you've got to have someplace else to go. And initially, countries like Great Britain, France, United States accepted Jews emigrating out of Germany into their own countries. But in every case, including the United States, at some point, those countries closed their doors and said, all right, we've taken enough people, we can't take any more. So I like to think, had these countries known where this was all going to end up, that they would have been open to receiving more people for longer. But at any rate, Jews found it exceedingly difficult after a period of time to leave, regardless of whether they were well resourced or not, regardless of what they were willing to sacrifice to leave, simply because other places would not take them. Well, I hope this video was helpful and give me a little bit of understanding of some of the steps that were taken before getting to the final solution period in Germany. I encourage you to check out the next video in this series where I will talk about the more significant steps that were taken to completely try to eliminate Jews and other non-desirable people in Germany. Thanks for watching.